Hello BookTube. So if you've been watching this channel for the past few months, you know that now that I'm back in America, one of my reading projects is to revisit some of the classic books that I read in high school. And here I have yet another book which is very commonly assigned in American high schools and which was assigned to me when I was in high school, which is Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. So again, I'm going to take a quick poll in the comments. Let me know. Did you read this book? Was it assigned to you in high school? Where are you from? Just let me know what your experience was with this book. Last month I reviewed Of Mice and Men, which I said and which I believe is very ubiquitous in American high schools. It's almost everyone who goes to high school in America has to read it at some point, I think. Black Like Me, I think, is a little bit less ubiquitous. It's assigned in some high schools, not all of them, and I wonder if it's still being assigned in high school nowadays, for reasons I'll talk about in just a moment. So, Black Like Me. The premise of the book is that it's a memoir of a white man, John Howard Griffin, who darkens his skin so he can pass as a black man, and then writes about his experience traveling in the Deep South as a black man. The book was published, I believe, in 1961, but he did his travels in 1960, right? So right at the cusp of the civil rights movement, back when there was a lot of racism going on in the Deep South. The book was very influential at the time, very famous at the time. It was later made into a movie. I think the movie came out in 1964. Like I said earlier, it was for many years very commonly assigned in American high schools. But, you know, I was talking about this book with one of my coworkers who, also an American, also went to high school, but he never heard of it before. So there you go. Not every American has to read this in high school. And I was describing the plot of it to him, and he was like, whoa, like blackface? And I was like, yeah, kind of. Actually, in the book, he goes to a few doctors, a few dermatologists. I think maybe just one. He goes to one dermatologist. He gets these pills to darken his skin. He goes through these UV treatments. So it's not purely a matter of applying like black paint on his face. He does go through some regimen, which involves pills and ultraviolet treatment to darken his skin. But then he also apparently puts on what he calls stain, which I guess is some sort of black dye. Yeah, it's a little bit unclear to me exactly how this works because you're reading it. So, you know, it's not like you're seeing it portrayed on the screen, although I guess there was a movie, but the movie was actors. But anyways, so you kind of have to take his word for it that his transformation really actually worked. Although, yes, sorry, I should take that back. There were some pictures taken of him at the time for newspapers and magazines because he was doing this project in conjunction with a magazine which was sponsoring it. But those pictures are not in this edition. I think there are in other editions, but in this edition we just get these grainy pictures on the back cover, which don't really tell us much. But anyways, if you're reading this edition without the good pictures, you just kind of have to take his word for it that the transformation was believable. What I found a little bit surprising is later on in the book, he decides to pass back to being white. So he stops taking the pills for a few days, and then I guess he doesn't apply the stain dye. And then he's, for a while, near the end of the book, he's going back and forth between being black and white, which I guess implies that it is largely just the dye he's putting on his skin. Sorry, all of that is a long way of saying there's some element of darkening his skin with dyes, which, yeah, some people would consider blackface. And I think my impression is that the national emotion around blackface or blackening your skin for the purpose of appearing like an African American, the sensitivity on that has gotten a lot higher in the last 20 years than it was in the 1990s when I read this book in high school. So part of me wonders if this book is still assigned in high school for that reason. The other thing, this was something we were discussing even back in the 90s. I remember my teacher made a point of saying this. Apparently, not all black people were happy with the reception that this book, the reception and the discussion around this book. Because when this book came out, a lot of white people read it. And a lot of white people were like, oh, wow, I guess racism in the South really is that bad. Who knew? And my teacher said it provoked a lot of frustration among black people who said, well, we've been telling you for years that this is a huge problem and you never listen to us. And then some white guy pretends, darkens his skin, experiences being black for 2 months, and all of a sudden now you believe him. Sorry. I'm thinking of what to say next because there are any number of directions you can go with this. Certainly one can understand that frustration. I don't think that means that John Howard Griffin was wrong to do what he did. And maybe a book like this was needed at that time in American race relations. But you do have to wonder if a school nowadays would be more likely to assign a book actually by an African American. Like, one of my friend's daughters is reading the autobiography of Malcolm X for her high school class. Maybe that would be a little bit more appropriate nowadays than a book like this. But anyone who knows, who's in high school, who teaches in high school, who knows somebody in high school, let me know if this book is still being assigned in high schools. I'd be curious about it. So anyways, that introduction out of the way, let's talk about this book. And I've already, I guess, kind of given an overview of it, talking about the controversy and the significance of it. But as the author describes in the beginning of the book, he was a writer. He got this idea to turn himself black, to get the black experience and write about it. I think it was actually sponsored by a black magazine, a magazine popular with African Americans, if I'm remembering right. So the magazine sponsored him, and he wrote up articles initially for the magazine. And then it's not entirely clear how much those were transformed for the book. The book is structured as a series of diary entries with a date on it. Possibly some of these were run in the magazine exactly like as is, or there was some editing later when they went into the book. I don't know. But the magazine agrees to sponsor it, and so then he goes about getting the transformation ready. The author talks about himself as somebody who was already well known for writing about race relations. I guess I'll have to take his word for it. He goes to New Orleans where he meets with a dermatologist and is taking the pills and is going through the regimen to darken his skin. And while he's doing that, he talks about walking around New Orleans, and he said, I used to go to all these places when I was blind, but now that I have sight, it's so great to actually see them for what they are and, see them in full color. And I was reading that, and I was like, what? That's kind of a strange thing to drop in there. And he does not explain it at all. So I guess, again, presumably maybe the author was better well known in 1960 and people were more familiar with his backstory, I guess, because it's not explained in this book at all. And I don't remember what my thoughts were when I read this in high school in the 1990s, but because it's 2025 now, I can easily go to the internet and find out what the story with that is. So you go to Wikipedia, and it turns out that John Howard Griffin had a rather interesting life. He was in the South Pacific, I believe, and was over there with World War II, and then he lost his sight as a result of some sort of concussion caused by a bomb that exploded near him. But then he miraculously regained his sight at the end of the 1950s. So, okay, yeah, that's a bit odd. Wikipedia has an interesting line there that says recent studies of some of the published material, published or unpublished material, have led some authors to the conclusion that John Howard Griffin was just faking his blindness. And I guess that would explain why his sight miraculously came back. So, yeah, I mean, if that's true, that's quite something. And I think he was supposed to have been blind for like close to 10 years or something like that. So that's quite a commitment to the bit if he was just faking that for 10 years. And it would raise obvious questions about the credibility of a person who would do that for whatever reason, publicity or to have an angle to write about or something like that. So there's a potential discussion there, but I've decided I'd like to sidestep this discussion because I don't want to be that guy who reads something on Wikipedia and takes it too credulously, even though I have been that guy in the past. So I tried to look at the sources that Wikipedia was citing for this. And the only links were taking me to some PDF of something that was written in French. So it doesn't look like it's that reliable. I don't know. Check out the Wikipedia page for yourself. And who knows, over time that page may or probably will get edited. But that whole discussion about whether or not he was faking his blindness, let's just sidestep that for now. We'll note it as something interesting in his Wikipedia bio, but then I'm going to proceed with the rest of this review as if that didn't exist, because it doesn't appear to be well sourced on Wikipedia. Anyways, okay. So apparently he has a background as being a bit of a well-known writer. Apparently he was blind and regained his sight, and this was, I guess, something that was well enough known to his reading public that he didn't have to explain it. So he, after the transformation is complete, he goes and experiences being a black man in New Orleans. And yes, so, sorry, once again, I'm trying to think of what to say first. I mentioned earlier that there were some black people who were apparently, according to my high school teacher, frustrated by the reception that this book got, where, when a white man goes ahead and tells a story, everyone believes it. When a black person tells a story, nobody believes it. But having mentioned that, I do think that perhaps there is some value in getting an outsider's perspective on what the black experience is like. And maybe to illustrate this, I'll bring up a different point. Anyone who's lived abroad will know that the first few weeks that you're living in a new country is when you notice everything. And then very quickly, everything that was new just kind of fades into the background, and you forget that you ever were surprised by it until like a friend visits you, and the friend coming from your own country. And then your friend is like, oh, wow, did you notice that? And you're like, oh, yeah, I remember when I first got here, that used to surprise me as well. I've gotten so used to it, I forgot there was ever a time that it surprised me. When I went to Australia to study as an international student, I was with a group of other international students. And I remember the professor said to us, now is the time to start journaling. He says, because in a few weeks, all the stuff that's new and interesting to you, you're going to stop noticing. So I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this already. There perhaps is some value in an outsider taking on the Black experience and just noting down all the things that maybe a Black person would have been so used to that they didn't even see it counted as notable for reporting on. So now obviously 1960s, the Deep South, segregated bathrooms, you can't get a cup of coffee at the White Cafe, all the stuff that you would expect. But there's also stuff that maybe you wouldn't expect, just the little things that he notices, which is the hate stares he will get from whites. So he goes into the bus station to buy a ticket, and there's a white woman selling the tickets, and she's perfectly courteous to the white customer in front of him. But then when he gets to the counter, she just fixes him this hate stare, just this very hateful stare, which he finds he's getting all the time now from whites, now that he's a Black person in New Orleans. And it's completely irrational, of course. Because even if you're a racist, even if you're a segregationist, you could say you don't want Black people to be in the same schools or to be in the same restrooms, but you wouldn't want to hate him for just existing, right? I mean, a Black person can't help existing. But, that's the attitude. And he recounts a number of things like this, where there's just all these superfluous discourtesies or hateful things that just get directed his way just for existing as a Black man from all the white people around him. The distrust of him when he goes into a store, or the way the common courtesies are not extended to him when he goes into a white-owned store, or from the white bus driver, all this kind of stuff. So that's interesting to read about. Perhaps those types of observations are interesting or valuable. I mean, the other thing, we all know at the time that the South was segregated and Black people couldn't use the same drinking fountains or use the same bathrooms. But he talks about the exhaustion that this produces. So, like having to walk for so long before you can find a place to sit, because you're not welcome to sit at the benches in most of the public parks. Or, being very thirsty and not being able to get water. Or having to go to the bathroom and not being able to go to the bathroom because there's not a place that will admit you. And he even talks about, at times hinting at some of these white places, like, couldn't you please just let me use your bathroom? Or couldn't I please just get a drink of water? And they all just say, like, no, sorry. And it's just, very matter-of-factly. So even if he's in desperate need of water or a place to use the bathroom, no luck. So we get a bit of a picture into the hardship that this produces, and the sense of exhaustion that this produces. Another thing that I found that was interesting about this book, he talks a few times in this book about the Parker Lynch case. Let me quote what he says about it here. It says, the news had spread over the quarter like a wave of acid. Everyone talked of it. Not since I was in Europe, when the Russo-German Pact of 1939 was signed, had I seen news spread such bitterness and despair. And you think, okay, wow, this sounds like it was really big news at the time. And then I think, the Parker Lynch case. Parker Lynch case. I've never heard of the Parker Lynch case. And, I thought I had studied the civil rights movement. I thought I knew all the big cases, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, the 3 civil rights workers murdered in Mississippi. I thought I knew all the big cases that had happened during this time. But I looked it up on Wikipedia, and sure enough, there's I think it was Charles Mack Parker, if I'm remembering the name right, was a black man. He was accused of raping a white woman. The evidence seems to be a little bit lacking. Possibly she was just made that rape accusation as a way of covering up an affair she was having. But while he was awaiting trial, a lynch mob took him out and killed him. And the FBI investigated the case, and the FBI was able to finger exactly who had done it, or I guess who had been the principal people involved in that murder. And so that evidence from the FBI, fingering exactly who the murderers were, was submitted to a jury, and the jury refused to indict them, which I think means that they didn't even get a trial. I guess you need the jury to indict you before you get to trial. I don't know. But it was just completely dismissed, even though the FBI knew exactly who had done it. There's a whole Wikipedia article about it. I'll try and remember to link to it in the description down below. But yeah, it was interesting. A little bit morbid, obviously, but interesting. And it also, again, let me test my own impressions against yours. Have you ever heard of this before? I had never heard of this before. When I don't remember what my impression were when reading this book in the 90s. It was before the internet, so any reference you didn't catch, you just kept reading. You didn't have the luxury of looking up on Wikipedia. But anyways, it's a reminder of just how much stuff gets left out of the history classes. Not, I think, for any nefarious reason, because my history classroom, we talked about Emmett Till and some of the other big cases around that time. But there was just so much of it that you couldn't possibly put it all into a high school history class. And so a lot of the stuff just gets left out. And even though, as described in this book, it was really big news that week it came out, it gets left out of the history books because I'm guessing there's just so many examples of that in the history curriculum you only choose a few symbolic cases, and those are the cases those are the cases everyone learns. Excuse me, my throat's getting a little bit dry, but drinking some water here. So yeah, that was an interesting reflection. He actually goes into Mississippi next, and he gets warned by people not to. A lot of his black friends say, whoa, calm down, you don't want to go to Mississippi, that's trouble. And he talks about the bus ride over there where he gets warned by the other black people exactly what to do, what not to do. He spends, I think, a night in Mississippi, if I'm remembering right, in a black town, and he just feels the tension in the air. Part of this because of that recent verdict from the Parker Lynch case not going to court. But he also mentions he's walking down the street of the black town, and a bunch of white teenagers come in and start throwing things at the black people. And the whole thing was just kind of simmering. And he actually, this is interesting for somebody whose assignment it is to go down and experience stuff. He gets cold feet. And he says, enough of this. And he calls one of his friends to come in and get him. And he just aborts. He does go back to Mississippi a little bit later. He goes to a different town, a coastal town. But the heart of Mississippi, he just gets so freaked out by all the racial tension there that he just doesn't feel safe. So yeah, that's interesting, huh? One of the observations he makes in this book is that when you're white and you're traveling through the South, it's so easy to think it's a nice place, like, beautiful scenery, friendly people. You're like, oh, okay, it has some racial problems, but it's the people here are nice. It's a beautiful country, etc. And he says, the last time he was traveling through the South as a white person, that's how he thought of it. But just his completely different mindset when he's traveling through the South now as a black person. He just feels how heavy the oppression is, feels how dangerous it is. I thought about that as I was reading this book. I've been back in the U.S. now, so I'm listening to classic rock stations and hearing some songs like Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd, right? Sweet Home Alabama, where the skies are so blue. Sweet Home Alabama, Lord, I'm coming home to you, or the one by the Doobie Brothers about going down to Mississippi, Dixieland, and fishing in the waters there. And you hear all these songs kind of praising the Southern way of life, and you think, okay, well, maybe that's a white person's perspective. Maybe if they were black, it would have been a little bit hard to romanticize it as much. And I know the Lynyrd Skynyrd song is a little bit more nuanced than I'm giving it credit for. It talks about the segregation and etc. But point being, it does make you consider. The other thing it makes you consider, we are living in times right now when American politics seems like it's gone completely crazy. But throughout this book, they're recounting a lot of the crazy laws that are being passed in the South, or some of these are proposed laws that don't actually get passed, like, a tax on any church that integrates, like as black and white people both attending, gets an extra tax on it. That's one proposed law that I think was in Mississippi, or using state funds to fund the White Citizen Council. And talks about, that there are some newspapers that are standing up against it. But talks about not only how crazy the politics are, but on the one hand, you have this complete ignorant racism driving the politics, but you also have the legal profession and the lawyers and the intellectual people who are doing the legal groundwork to give the legal justification for all these crazy racist laws. So, to me, it seems like we're entering that period in the U.S. where we've got a bunch of really crazy stuff is happening, and there are dishonest intellectuals who are using their legal background to create justification for things that are blatantly immoral. But it's a reminder that this stuff is not that foreign maybe to American politics. 1960 was still in living memory. All right, I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to stop here. Thank you very much, BookTube.